Welcome to another episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. Today we have special guest Ryan Whitaker. He's been here at Thrust as a CFI, but I'll allow him to introduce himself in a moment. Just know that today we'll be talking a little bit more about what it looks like to be a CFI, some of the things you learn along the way, and maybe the transition into the ZTA program after you already have your private started. We'll be talking a little bit about what Ryan enjoys about flying and about being a CFI. So if you guys want a little bit more insight on some of these things, stick around. But for the time being, Ryan, if you don't mind, introducing yourself briefly and we can get to know you a little bit more.
Yes, my name is Ryan Whitaker. I've been a CFI at Thrust for about 18 months and came here after my private. So I did private part 61. Started with Thrust in after that in March 23. Got hired in November 23. Been here ever since. Still love it.
Yeah, it's awesome, right? Yeah, it hasn't faded out yet, right? What kind of got you into actually looking into aviation?
So it was actually came a little bit later. I played hockey growing up.
Yeah.
And in the peak of it, probably, my high school years, I was traveling every other weekend, or every third weekend for it. And we're, fly to DFW here. And so then I was in and around airports. I was in and around planes. And I played hockey up until the time I was 20.
Oh, wow.
So I played for 2 years out of high school. Played junior hockey after high school. And so it was during that time where, like I said, I'd done the traveling and stuff like that. So I kind of seen it firsthand. And I'd done some research on my own along with my uncle. He's a captain at Southwest, and he talked to me a lot about it. And
around that time in your life, he talked to you a lot about it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. We've always been very close.
Okay.
But I knew, I kind of got to an age, I was 20. I was like, I got to do something here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to, I read into it and watched videos and things like that. And I took a discovery flight and I really liked it,
Yeah, and then from there, you're just like, I think this is what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there any hesitancy?
Yeah, it's kind of a big leap, because at the time I was quitting hockey. That was all I knew, because I knew hockey wasn't going anywhere past that point. And it was something that it was kind of crazy to think that like this was the start of what hopefully would be my career.
Was it hard to accept anything about like the fact that hockey wasn't going to take you further?
I guess you got to keep your ego at the door. But,
Yeah.
I was also thankful for, what it had been. And I talked to my parents about it, and they're like, if you, because up to that point, I'd been talking about flying for about a year and a half.
Okay.
And they're like, if that's something you want to do, like, there's no point in delaying it. Right. And so,
Did it kind of feel like you were delaying it for a second?
Well,
I asked that because, just to put it in perspective, there's a lot of people who know they're interested in everything. And some people, maybe they have certain obstacles, maybe don't or do or whatever. Yeah. But either way, a lot of people know that maybe this is an option and I am interested. And maybe it does take a year or 2 years, maybe longer. But that's why I asked that.
So there was still a little bit of, I guess there was a chance I could still play hockey.
Yeah.
But my dad was saying, he's like, if you play hockey, you're just kind of, it's not helping you in any way anymore, because I was trying to go to college and play, but getting a college education, in the schools that I could have played hockey at, didn't have an aviation program or anything like that. So he's like, now's the time, you're delaying the start of your life a little bit if you, your adult life, I guess.
Yeah, no, I get it.
That makes sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, regardless if it's your adult life or just the next step of like your youth or whatever, like I think the next step can be easily delayed. And I've felt that way in certain times where it's like, I really love this thing and it's given me so much. Like it actually has, like whether it be like internally, externally, friends, whatever, but I've enjoyed it and it's given me a lot. And I think it's shaped me a lot. But it's like kind of now feels like it's at a standstill. And I don't know if that's because I did something wrong or I'm not doing something right, or if, it's time to take that elsewhere.
Yeah, no, 100%.
You come to that point and you're like, oh, it's time to make a decision to try this out. What did that look like, and what did it feel like?
I'd heard of schools, these accelerated 141 programs like Thrust, and there's obviously some others, really at the time that were bigger than Thrust.
Right.
After talking with my parents, it's it's not a secret. It's an expensive education, right?
Absolutely.
So
it's not a secret. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
And they're before I guess signed that ticket, I wanted to make sure that I wanted to do it as a career. So I did Part 61 first, which is more of a pay as you go, but it's not. And we can get into that later. There's pros and cons.
I'll just probably ask you about it after this.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to each. But that way, if after my private pilot's license, if I didn't want to do it as a career, then I would have, just done something else. Right. But, it worked out the way it did. And then, from instrument on, I went to Thrust.
For anyone who's listening on streaming platforms, YouTube, whatever, you probably relate to this if you're watching this, because maybe you've started your training or maybe you haven't yet. And either way, you could relate to the idea that do I commit like all the way? And if I do, can I do that? You know what I mean? Can I even succeed in that kind of commitment? And then what if I change my mind later? Like, I feel like those kind of questions, like, do I commit? Can I succeed? And what if I change my mind? I feel like those have got to be huge questions that everyone has.
Well, 100%. And like you said, it's like the start in the new career, right? So it's almost, it could be a lot of pressure, right?
Absolutely.
It's a lot of money,
Yeah, I mean, it's a niche industry. How much does this transfer? It's not a degree, right? It's a lot of money, and and it can be difficult. And do I even know anyone who does it? Have I ever been in a plane? Like, I just feel like it's. I always admire a lot of the people I talk to here, because you guys often are someone who like make a hard choice like that, and I feel like those kind of choices are the kind that, like, I think a lot of people dream of making, or the kind of choices you see in movies, where it's like, I'm gonna do this thing, and to everyone else it seems like whoa, and I think it really is that kind of whoa decision. Yeah. So, anyways, I say that to say, a lot of people will probably start at Part 61 out of just trying to gauge their own interests and
dip
fears
your toe
or
in the
whatever.
water.
Yeah, exactly. So, what did you learn from going to Part 61 in terms of your interest and your commitment?
So I started out with the Discovery Flight, and Discovery Flight was cool. It's your first time, at least for me, and probably for most people, that you're in a small plane that's not, not a pressurized cat, right? Not an American Airlines flight.
Yeah.
And so it's loud. It's hot. It's the middle of August. It's hot.
Especially here in Texas.
Yeah, and you're getting bumped around and things like that. And so the Discovery Flight, it's not like I fell in love right away.
Okay.
It's like sparked my interest more because a lot of it's kind of smoke and mirrors right off the bat. There's a lot on the screen, right? A lot of moving parts. And so going to Part 61, it wasn't until, I don't know, probably 5 hours in when I started understanding what was going on. Now, I'm not saying at 5 hours I thought I knew what was going on, right? I could kind of...
But that was your first step.
Yeah, read some of the instruments, kind of know, and I could probably keep it off the ground kind of thing, keep it up in the air. That it really hooked me. And then, you solo and things like that. And then the one that I really liked was like I said, going to new airports, was the cross-country solo.
Is that your first? Yeah?
Yeah, so you solo, you do about 3 touch and goes in the pattern, and then your next solo, you're going and on a cross country.
What is the solo? Like, what's the point of it?
So a solo is a private, or when you're working on your private pilot's license, is you get to a point where you don't need your instructor in the plane with you anymore, and it's part of the course requirements. Here at Thrust, we need 5 hours of solo. So you're going to get to a point probably within your, first 15, 20 hours of flight time. And your initial solos, you do 3 stop and goes or full stop taxi backs in a pattern. So you get proficient enough where you make all the radio calls. You do, all your checklists by yourself unprompted. And it's just, it's a big confidence builder. It's your first time, like I said, it's early on in your training that you're like, oh man, there is no safety valve anymore, and then after that you have your cross country solo, which is not only, your initial solo is probably 45 minutes of flying by yourself. Yeah. Your cross country, is about 3 hours of flying by yourself. A lot of people take off out of Addison, go to Tyler,
Right.
hit an airport on the way back and back in. But you're making everything. You're talking to Addison Tower, you're talking to Lone Star Approach, Tyler Tower, depending on where you go. And
Yeah.
so that to me was, I guess I knew I really liked it before that, but when I got to that point, that's when I fell in love with it completely.
That was the moment where you kind of just believed you could do it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Especially, that like I said, the initial solo in the pattern, it's only about 45 minutes flying, and your instructor kind of has his eyes on you the whole time as you're, buzzing around the pattern. But
Yeah.
that cross country, that's he comes back, all right, 3 hours later, I guess I'll see you, And obviously it's not quite like that. They have they've done all the necessary training and things like that, and they'll probably keep an eye on you, but
But there's a level of independence that you achieve in that moment. It's
100%.
This is the quote I thought of earlier, and it's kind of relevant now, maybe. The thrill of flying isn't in the danger, it's in the mastery. And I guess, I don't know who said that. It's just anonymous that said. But
Gandhi, I think
I guess I'm
said
just
that.
thinking, like, people think, oh, it's thrilling. And at first you're like, oh, it's almost like I'm chasing a thrill. But then there becomes like, oh, I can do this no matter how dangerous or like how crazy it might seem. And I feel like there's like a double-edged sword there. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, like you said, there's always risk involved in it,
Mhm.
but like you said, it's almost the thrill is when you get that proficiency I talk about, where it's
Yeah.
I always think of in my eyes, there's a lot of things that make a great pilot, but the smoothness is, someone who's not, is just smooth on the controls, it just makes it seem like very calm and under control.
That's
And I
awesome.
think, kind of like what your quote was saying. That's
Yeah.
what it makes me think of.
Let's say you're nearing the end of your Part 61 training. Maybe you're just looking to get to your private. What were you thinking about where you're like, oh, I want to commit harder? Like, what pushes you to make the decision to go to thrust after that?
Well, I knew early on in my training, like you
Yeah.
said, like especially after the solos and stuff like that, that um, I wanted to do it. And at the time, Thrust didn't, quick plug, I guess, but Thrust didn't have the Part 61 finish up or anything. And I didn't honestly know about Thrust until a week before my private check ride. I just Googled flight schools, and obviously there's a competitor of ours that that has been well known,
Yeah.
and that's who I thought I would go to. And not saying that there's anything wrong with them, but I came to Thrust and I toured,
Mhm.
and it got me. It was kind of a smaller at the time. It was much smaller than it is now,
Yeah.
and it just seemed like a community, which
Mhm.
was nice because I was coming from Part 61 and I was doing everything kind of, I didn't know anyone else that was going through the same training, same level of training I was at. If that
Right.
makes sense,
Absolutely. You didn't have any like, peers.
yeah, any classmates or anything like that. And so the community got me. The in-person grounds was what really sold me.
Hmm.
And, I just, it really, after that tour, I was like, because at first I thought I was going to go to the other school forever, even since like that was my plan I was like, yeah, I'll do Part 61 and then I'll go to this school. But
Yeah.
then I went to Thrust, and a week later I passed my private check ride,
Yeah.
and then I was in the next month's class.
Man, that's pretty cool. Do you feel like that was kind of like just an intuitive decision? Did you think really hard about it or anything?
Um, no, I certainly thought hard about it
Yeah.
and read the reviews and everything like that. And like I said, went on a tour, so I talked to people that know what the heck's going on and
Yeah.
things like that. And I can't. It's funny. I can't even remember what led me to visit Thrust, other than like because
Looking.
my mind was just so set on the other school.
Yeah.
And then once I got to Thrust and I toured with Nathan, and um, that's what led me to Thrust. And it's funny that I didn't know anybody. I was just there for a tour, and my now boss, I guess, Chief Pilot Humberto,
Yeah.
who was my instructor in CFI, he was there. And it's just funny looking back that, I was like, oh, it's just some dude. And
Y-
then now I've known him for, the better part of 2 years.
Yeah, and then it's someone you work closely with. It seems like probably.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
that's really cool to hear that. I think Thrust really does attempt to like. You can only do so much to purposely create culture,
Hmm.
other than just create an environment. that people want to succeed in.
Yeah.
And I think that common goal is what does it. I think the only way to really create an environment like that is do your best at pushing people and
Mhm.
having certain expectations, but also giving as many resources to meet those expectations.
Yeah.
And I think when I talk to students who have come from other schools or maybe did the finish line program, or have talked to pilots who are in the airlines and didn't go to thrust, resources is always a thing.
Yeah.
And I think people are big resources, community, stuff like that. So it's full
100%.
circle. But
Yeah.
um, I guess what I wanted to ask about there is, oh, there you go. You mentioned, well, we didn't have the finish line program, and then also you mentioned the fact that you took a tour, and then you mentioned community. So I just want to quick plug for you guys. We do have the finish line program. I'll have him maybe talk a bit about what he knows about it. But basically, if you're someone who's in private and you're really looking to move on with your training, and you've kind of had that moment that Ryan's had where, I want to do this as a career. This is what I really want to do, and you want to go into a program that is more focused on that and has more people who are thinking that way. And maybe you want to go to thrust. The finish line program allows you to kind of pick up where you left off at thrust flight and continue your career training here to become a pilot. Meaning you don't have to finish your private check ride where you're at. If you're struggling to kind of finish it up, you can kind of get that done here. Actually, within 5 days if you qualify, and then you'll just move on through instrument and everything else that it takes to become a career pilot. I don't want to oversimplify it, but if you're curious about that and you want to get past where you're at, give us a call and we can explain it a little bit more. Also, we have tours. This isn't me, only if you're nearby and you're really interested in flying. Just know that tours are really cool. um, can you tell me a little bit more about, like, okay, you kind of made the decision, you started, you're all signed up. What was it like starting at a school like this, coming from a Part 61?
Well, I was also in student housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the day before, I guess our thrust day when they start the new class,
Mm-hmm.
I had 3 other roommates. And that honestly was the best thing for me, was living in student housing.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'll touch on that later. But
Yeah.
and then I remember going to ZTA day and meeting, uh, I only had 5 other people that started with me. Like I said, it was a little bit smaller back then.
Yeah.
And just seeing the community, a bunch of red shirts and, the black shirts, and seeing how many students there were, and really just, I was kind of thought, I was like, well, I guess they must be good at it. Seems like there's a lot of people here,
Yeah.
learning to fly. I was
Exactly.
like, I must be at the right spot.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people who thought the same thing, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That's pretty cool. Was it nerve wracking at all?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And, you know, I I would like to say I'm outgoing, but I think right off the bat, I'm probably a little bit just keep to myself. And it wasn't until, you know, well, heck, it wasn't really until I got to CFI when I, started to know people a little bit more. Like, right,
Yeah.
I had my roommates, and obviously I was really good friends with them.
Hmm.
But right off the bat, yeah, you're pretty quiet. You're just, speak when spoken to, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Exactly. I feel like I'm an outgoing person, to be honest, as well. I think of myself that way, but in certain situations where I'm in like a very unfamiliar environment, I'm gonna probably be a bit more reserved
Yeah,
until like I can find common ground.
yeah,
And
100%.
ironically, sometimes finding common ground means you gotta like put yourself out there. So
Yeah, you
it's
got to talk to him. Imagine
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So but to your point, you say living in student housing was probably one of the best things for you. Did that help at all with breaking the ice a little bit?
One of my roommates started with me
Hmm.
that day, but my other 2 roommates had already been there for a month.
Yeah.
So they helped me kind of, you know, the ropes, I guess, of it.
Yeah.
And, who to avoid. No, I'm just playing, no one to avoid, but things to do, how things work and stuff like that. And the one of them is still, we're all still friends, but one of them is still, he lives out in Mississippi, he flight instructs out there, and I still see him, a couple times a month.
Yeah.
And he was also kind of a competitive thing too, helping me, if he would go to the library to study, I'm like, well, if he's going to study, like, what am I doing? That kind of thing.
Exactly.
And I think without them and studying together and things like that, I don't think I would have had the success. I think I would have still gotten through the program, but I don't think I would have gotten through it in the time that I did. Like I said,
Absolutely.
just for, days like that where he'd go to the library. I'm like, well, guess I'm studying too. You know what I mean? Like there's no, it makes you think like, why am I not?
You see a friend putting in work, you're like, well, what is that? Am I
Yeah.
about this or not? Are they gonna put in more work than me? Am I gonna let them do that?
Yeah,
It's not like
exactly.
competition, but maybe it is a friendly competition.
Yeah, it's almost like a
Yeah.
little bit, I guess, pride, maybe. I don't know. Like,
Anyone who's joining thrust flight or any fast-paced program, really anyone who's committing to flying, but I think specifically fast-paced programs
hmm
with the focus of a career, anyone who's joining a program like that are saying that they're committed to becoming a pilot
yeah.
and they're committed to aviation. And if you say something like that, I mean, you kind of just are saying that. If you're saying something like that, then yeah, those kind of things come up. It's
Yeah.
like, am I about it or not?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
What are some of the things that were difficult about the flying part of being a student pilot? Like, what was one of the
Mm.
first times you felt like, "Yeah, this is really hard. I actually need to like really apply myself here."
Yeah, that's never really gone away.
Yeah.
No, I'm just playing. No,
No, I mean that's okay. That might be true.
yeah, I still don't really know what's going on that much, but you know, first time at thrust, I came from when I flew Part 61. Addison, we fly out of Addison here. It's a pretty busy airport, and I came from an old plane. I think it was built in the '60s that had all those old steam gauge, nothing electronic really in it other than the radios. And then I can't come to thrust, and it's like brand new plane and big screens. I'm like, where the heck is everything? What? Yeah, I don't. Now I'm back to this point where I was saying, I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And it's the busiest airport I've ever been to, and stuff like that. And I was like, and I came in like, yeah, I'm a private pilot. Like I know what, I know what's going on. And I'm like, dang, okay, this is like I don't,
Yeah.
and
It's like
and then
culture shock kind of in a
a little
sense. Yeah.
bit, and then before you know it, now it's second nature.
I'm sure there's a lot more of those moments ahead, right?
Yo, yeah, 100%. And with the flying and nothing was. It was just more. I always understood, but it was almost like kind of perfecting the craft, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you say that's kind of like a reoccurring thing to sit there and hit something that's like, whoa, there's a lot to know here,
Yeah,
and then
100%.
look back at it later and be like, oh man, I mean,
Yeah. Well, and not to mention the stuff that you think you know a lot about, and then you hear like someone overhear someone talking, and you're like, "Oh, geez, I've never heard that in my life," and then you're like, "I guess I gotta still do some more." You never know it all.
yeah, there's always more to learn. I think do you feel like that's probably one of the most true like skills to pick up, or like, do you think that's one of the biggest things to learn is how to adapt to that feeling because that feeling doesn't go away?
Yeah, 100%. Because it never, even when if you go through the whole program, you get hired on, and you're a CFI working here, like
And you think that you're gonna hit this plateau of like, oh, I'm
no,
proficient.
you'll never, you'll never know it all.
Yeah.
You can only hope to know enough, I guess.
Uh,
Uh,
was that a realization you had to come to?
oh, 100%. And like I said, my uncle,
Mm.
he told me that he's like, as soon as you think you know everything, it'll change, and new regulations, new equipment, new things like that.
So when you realized, like, you probably had a moment where you're like, oh yeah, like he said that, and now I get it. I
Yeah,
guess.
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's probably also part of the attraction, though.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Always kind of growing and things like that, and something new, it's
Yeah,
not the same thing over and over again.
it's almost like a part of you would want to kind of hit a place where you're like, oh, I'm good. I know everything I need to know, and I can kind of go from here, you know. But then the other part of you is like, that would be so boring.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Okay, I guess I was curious about it. So right now, as a CFI, is there any moments you can look at when you were a student? You're like, wow, I'm really like I had these struggles, and now I get to help people with those exact same struggles. Are there any things that you kind of gravitate towards of being able to help people with?
Yeah, so specifically I do, nothing but stage checks. I just got
Yeah,
EOC checked out too, but I've been
nice.
doing stage checks for over a year now. And the
Do
biggest
they do stage checks everywhere? Do you know? And if not, can you explain that a little bit?
so stage checks are part of they're not a part 61 thing. So the course like what Thrust has, part 141 course, there's stage checks that basically just check you along the way. And it'll be both ground knowledge or, book knowledge and flight, things to do in the flight. And it's
Mhm.
just, for instance, I'll mention the private or reference the private course. It's, you have stage one, and it's basically it's right before your solo. So we want you to kind of do everything by yourself. We do some maneuvers. Landings are the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we'll ask you some questions on the ground. Then we go to stage 2, which is just, okay, not only can you land the plane safely, but can you hit your point? Can you make it soft? Things like that. And some emergencies, cross-country flight planning, because by that time you've done all your solos. You should know how to, fly cross-country, right?
Right.
And then stage 3 is just checkride prep, basically. So
And
we'll
this is all
do
part of private,
private,
right?
exactly.
So then the stage
And
3.
so, yeah, it's just a mock checkride, or in our case, mock EOC. So the point of them is to, you know, they're just to kind of get you in that checkride mode
Mm-hmm.
where you're being evaluated,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not out to get you, but you are, we are grading you. And so that not only that, you have that confidence of knowing when you go to the check ride that, hey, I'm where I need to be, right? I
Right.
passed this 1, 2, and 3, this many stage checks, and I'm ready to go. And that was something that was big for me going from private part 61. I didn't have any stage checks. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I flew with basically only my instructor. He's like, "Oh, you're good to go." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess. If you say so."
Yeah.
And then coming to thrust, where they had the stage checks, you go into that check ride or EOC knowing, I've done this,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
That's that's kind of big. There's 2 questions I have there, and maybe I'll ask them now so I don't forget. But um, one, it's not like you didn't learn. It's not like you didn't learn the same things technically, right? Like we teach the same knowledge and from the same resources in private here at Thrust as we would in like a Part 61, right?
hmm
But what you're saying is like being sent off with the knowledge, and then being sent off with the knowledge, and then maybe some of this like structured learning. It's a different experience.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have, it's the comfortability of knowing, like you've also had, you know, because when you go to private, it's your first check ride, right? And it's
Mhm.
nervous, kind of like a driver's test, right? You're in there with an examiner, but it's your fourth time going into a situation like that where
Mm.
that guy's grading you,
Mhm.
right? And I think that if anything, that plays as big of a role in it as it's just the repetition, right?
Right.
Like if you only practice and you never play games,
Yeah.
and then you have a big game coming up, right? But if you have played in big games before, right? It's
Exactly. Like scrimmages, though. You got the team together at the beginning of the season. Like, I get it. As a stage checker, like now as a CFI, still wondering about like what it is that you enjoy being able to help people with that you could relate to as a student.
the biggest thing I tell people is to go, when I either my students or if I'm telling somebody that has a stage check or after the flight kind of thing, it's like get out of the mindset of, oh, I'm not trying to mess up,
Mm.
and especially when you're early on, you get nervous because people get, it's just natural to whenever you're getting graded, right, to be nervous. I'm like, get out
Absolutely.
of the mindset of trying not to mess up, but rather show me. You're gonna show this guy how much you know,
Yeah.
right? You're already a private pilot, but I'm just gonna show him. You're already an instrument rated pilot. I'm just gonna show him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped. That helped me, and I think that I've seen that help a lot of students. Kind of, the work is done. You're just gonna show them, right? And you're gonna put your best foot forward, and what's gonna happen is what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I like that, and I think that's a good way to think about it. It's kind of a shift in mentality and
Yeah,
taking ownership of all the work you've done.
hundred
That
percent.
makes sense. Where you're at now, what's going on with where you are in your journey in aviation? Is there any goals that have changed? What kind of goals do you have, and kind of what steps are you in now?
Yeah. So I'm currently at. I think I added it up yesterday. 1,630 hours.
Okay.
So I have my ATP mins, right? Just you know, it's not like I still like my job, right? But
Yeah.
I'm ready for that next step. Just waiting on a interview or a call to schedule an interview kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some few things that are, you know, looking good, right?
Right.
But so it's kind of a waiting game as it is, or currently it is right now,
Yeah.
and just continue to um, do my job here.
When there's something that I'm anticipating and that I'm eager for,
hmm
and I can't quite get my hands on right away, like I'll get kind of like antsy about
Especially if
it.
it's out of your control.
Yeah.
That's the thing that you have to remind yourself, right? It sucks that it's out of your control, but at the same time, you know,
That's fact.
yeah,
That's just life.
yeah, exactly. Like I said, you play the cards you're dealt.
I guess I hear a lot of people talk about the kind of fear of not being able to get to the airlines. I hear about it personally, and I don't know what stages people are in when they're talking about that fear.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's when before they start or when they get to the point that you're at that they feel that way.
Yeah, I've heard that too, just from students. I'm like, heck, you got, 6 months before you even look for a CFI job. I think you should just kind of slow down a little bit. Like if you're trying to make a career out of it, I'm only 23. I can fly for the airlines for another 42 years, right?
Yeah.
Stuff would have to go pretty south, far south for me not to ever, get to that point. Or, for instance, if you just got to take advantage of the things that come up. Like if you do get an interview, you need to do well on it and prepare yourself and things like that.
It's a lifelong journey,
Yeah, exactly.
and there's a lot to enjoy along the way. And I don't know. The other thing I really like about what you said was things would have to. If you look at the long run, things would have to go pretty south for you not to get there. In the future, do you want to fly the airlines? Do you want to fly Part 135? Is there a particular plane? Kind of like, what's an image that you might have for yourself?
I always imagined that I would want to end up at the airlines.
Yeah.
Just based on what like my uncle has told me, and the lifestyle that comes with that. 135 though would be really cool. In a perfect world, I would fly 135 and then end up at the airlines.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of but there's a lot of cool flying. It's like it's kind of a shame that it's almost like you don't have enough time. I think it'd also be cool to fly bush planes up in Alaska, right? But in a perfect world, end up at the airlines. That's where you retire, kind of thing. And
That's funny you say that though. You can do anything. Like there's so many different ways to go. Do I even have time to experience all the different cool ways of flying?
exactly.
Like you said in Alaska. I mean, I can only imagine the view.
Well, I've just seen the YouTube videos, but it looks kind of cool.
What are some of the best ways to get over a maneuver that you've been struggling with?
YouTube videos help. Talking to other people, talking to, I think, like I said, students are the biggest resource here. If you're other students are the biggest resource. Talking to them, maybe backseating. Those are the things that, and I know that's kind of thrust specific backseating, but talking to other students that are there, watching YouTube videos, just getting different points of view on it. And then maybe the way someone talks about it clicks better than the, how you've been hearing it kind of thing.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's in line with some of the things that other people say. But at the end of the day, you're using your resources. Are there any YouTube channels that you really like to refer to, whether it be just like to kind of get osmosis learning through, or just for specific things?
Really, it was more the ground knowledge. I like Flight Insight. I think was a big one. Fly 8 Mike Alpha, I think, was another one. Those are the two that come to mind that I really liked. And so it's just, and like I said, it's just to get a different point of view kind of thing on something.
Exactly. I'm that way. I just need more exposure.
Yeah,
kind of person.
100%. And maybe they say one sentence about something that maybe clicks in your head.
But what kind of advice would you give a student generally who's like a little nervous that before their check ride?
I always like to tell them, like, you are the PIC. You're the pilot in command, right? You're the one in control of this airplane, right? Think of all the work that you've done leading up to this point. You obviously know what's going on.
What mindset do you think it is that makes people more nervous than they really should be? Because some people, they had the skill.
Yeah.
And they have everything they need, but they're still nervous.
Just the fact that it is a graded flight or a graded ground, people get nervous and they don't want to mess up. They don't want to, Checkride, you don't want that on your record.
It's like a performance and a results thing.
Yeah, maybe some imposter syndrome too, and things like that, which probably is not warranted, right? Yeah. But it's just, I think that's the root of it all. Really, is just that you're getting graded, and you don't want to mess up, basically.
For someone who's interested in aviation, and maybe hasn't like pulled the trigger, maybe it's been a little while, and this is just something they're consistently interested in. What would you say to them?
Go to different flight schools, go on tours. Discovery flight's a big one. Kind of just be around it, and I think that's those are easy accessible things to do, like discovery flights and going on tours. And I think along with YouTube videos, talking to other people. You go on a tour and you talk to the students that are in the process of it. And I think, you know, then you can make your own opinions about it. But
Mhm.
if it's something you're interested in, I think 100% you owe it to yourself to, you know, do some research, right?
Right,
Go
at
and
least.
see and see if it's something you really are interested in.
On that note, thank you, Ryan, for joining us on another episode of Pilots Say What, where we get to hear what pilots have to say. And I think you've given us some good things to think about for people who are considering flying or are still flying. And I got a lot out of it personally. So we'll see you guys on the next episode next week. Until then, go ahead and make sure to hit like, comment, and subscribe because that really helps our viewership and it helps other people who could enjoy this find us. Thank you.